Ladies and gentlemen, presented by the WZWA Network, it's the Insider's Edge Podcast with your host, Karlifornia.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Insider's Edge Podcast here on the WZWA Network. I'm your host with the most on the West Coast, Karlifornia in Fury. It's a joy to be with you all once again. I know I say that every single time, but it is a joy. You know why? Because I've been a hot mess lately and I keep on missing out on interviews and all that stuff. And we're only putting one out every 2 or 3 weeks. I'm sorry, I'm trying really hard, but it's difficult when your life is consumed with 12-hour shifts several times a week. So I'm doing my best, everyone. I promise we will get back to weekly interviews. But anyway, enough of me whinging and complaining. It's time to be happy and have a fun time here with my next guest here, but I'm going to say this right now before I introduce her. As we know, on the Insider's Edge podcast, we've had interviews with wrestlers, managers, promoters, ring announcers, producers, authors of books, journalists, the whole kit and caboodle, really. And that was always the goal, to bring the light to the unsung heroes of the industry, because no matter what, who, when, how, and why, these people are just as important and as interesting as one another, which brings me to my guest. She's been in the business for 25 plus years, and I can't wait to find out about her story. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the one, this is the only, this is Shannon Hunter. How are you, Shannon?
Hi, I'm great. How are you?
I am wonderful, and it's great to have the chance to talk to you. We've had some interactions on Twitter, I think since TOD 19, when my channel did a review show of that amazing event. And since then, I followed you, and I can clearly see your passion. And the passion, I feel it all the way from the most isolated city in the world here, Perth, Western Australia. I feel it, and that's why I wanted to talk to you here today. Shannon, the first question, as per usual on every show, how did you become a fan of professional wrestling?
So I feel like I was like maybe 5 or 6. And so my brother was a wrestling fan, and he was also a triple black belt in martial arts. And so wrestling was always sort of in the background of my life. I'm 46 now. So, you know, when you're a little kid, you know, it's a very typical story. You know, you're flipping around, and one of two things either happens to you. You're flipping around on television and you see wrestling on TV. You stopped for a second, and either you stop and you watch it and you fall in love with it forever, or you keep going and it just doesn't affect your life. So I feel like, you know, I am the former, not the latter. You know what I'm saying? I think that for me, wrestling is embedded in the bedrock of who I am. I found out much later in my life that my great aunt wrestled bears and carnies. You know, so wrestling is just, you know, part of sort of my family DNA in a lot of ways. You know, my brother was a wrestling fan and obviously involved in martial arts. My nephew was involved in mixed martial arts. You know, so I think that this type of aspect of the sport just sort of was in my DNA, and I was always sort of destined to enjoy it.
Very cool. You see, I became obsessed with professional wrestling in about 1998. And then I come to find out that my grandmother's cousin was a guy by the name of Ray Crawley, who used to wrestle in England in the World of Sport days. So I like to say that it's in my blood too, even though that's a real far stretch, being my nan's cousin. But anyway, back to you. Okay, so you said 5 years old. This has been, you know, with you the whole time. Okay, the years wear on. You're still a fan. How did you first become involved in pro wrestling, and what kind of work had you been known to do at that time?
So when I'm originally from Buffalo, New York, and I moved to New York City in 1999 to get my master's degree at Columbia University. And I was way younger than the people that I was in school with, a lot of them were in their 30s and 40s, and they had worked at the Pentagon and all this kind of weird stuff. And I had gone straight from high school to college and from college to grad school. And I just wasn't connecting emotionally with a lot of people. And I needed, I needed to create that circle around me of friendships. So I said, let me see if there's any sort of, wrestling schools or anything like that. Maybe I could, take pictures or something like that. So, at the time, the internet was like just a thing in the late 90s. So I went, on the internet, and I was looking for local wrestling schools, and I found Jersey All Pro in Bayonne, New Jersey. And I hit up Fat Frank, who owned the company, and he called me and he said, and I said, what do you need? And he said, well, what can you do? And I said, well, what do you need? And he said, well, what can you do? And I said, well, I can take pictures. He said, well, why don't you come down? And what was funny about that is, in order to get to New York, I had pawned my camera. So I had to really quick, the day of the first show I went to, go and buy like a little camera. And, excuse me. And I explained that away, basically saying that, this was my test camera. And I was just, making sure that it was something that I wanted to do. So I went and I had a good time. And he said, we would really, like for you to come back. So then I had to go out and actually rebuy an actual camera. At that point, in the 90s, it was still the film cameras. So I worked at Jersey All Pro for like a couple of years. And then when I was working at Jersey All Pro, I was introduced to people from the Doghouse, like Homicide and Low Life Louie and Frankie Stars. And they said, well, why don't you come down to the Doghouse since you're living in New York? I have always lived in Manhattan, but the Doghouse was in Brooklyn. And so they said, well, why don't you come down to the Doghouse? And so then I would go to the Doghouse every weekend and spend, my Saturdays at the Doghouse when I wasn't at Jersey All Pro or at Jersey Championship Wrestling, which was owned at that time by Ricky O. So that was sort of like the beginning. I would do this loop where I would do JP, JCW in the Doghouse. And that was sort of where I was at the beginning of my career in the 90s, in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Right. So was that primarily doing photography?
That was primarily doing photography. At the very beginning of my career, that was how I got my foot in the door. Very similar to like a Jim Cornette or a Paulie. I was doing photography. And at that point, I didn't know what else I wanted to do, but I knew that was not going to be the thing that I was going to do forever. Some people know that that's their path. Some people are real artists and they know that that's their path and that's what they want to be doing in wrestling. For me, I knew that was not going to be the thing. I knew that was a stepping stone to do other things. So I knew that I needed to figure out what that was and how to get there as soon as I could. Because at the time, too, photography was very expensive because, you had your equipment and you had to develop the film and all of that. And it was, not easy. For me, it was trying to figure out in that period of like 5 or 6 years or so, how to pay those dues and figure out what the thing was that I wanted to do. And that ended up being running shows and running the locker room. And how that ended up coming about is that Jason Knight, of ECW grabbed me up and said, I'm starting a company in Connecticut. He's like, why don't you come with me and help me out? And so Jason taught me how to run a show, and how to run a locker room. And one of the benefits of working for somebody like Jason is that he really valued women and women's voices and women in wrestling way before any of this women's revolution shit started. So, this was in the early 2000s. So Jason taught me that, I was capable of telling men what to do. You know what I'm saying? And that my voice mattered and that people had to listen to me. And and I was a young girl. I was like 23. So, I think there was so much value in that because, when you're a young girl and you are figuring out who you are and what you want to do, and this man who was successful is telling you, no, these people have to listen to you. Go yell at them. I think you really figure your shit out really quick. And he was also the type of person who would not tell you the answer to a problem because you would be like, what do I do? And he would be like, well, what do you think? And so Jason trained myself, he trained Mercedes Martinez, and he trained Velvet Sky all at the same time. We were all in the same quote unquote class. And that used to infuriate all of us. What do you think? Just tell us the answer. But I guarantee you, all of us would say the same thing, that we are so grateful for the fact that he forced us to figure it out, because we're all so much better and smarter because of that, because he would never just give you the answer. He would make you figure it out yourself. And he would give you the space to screw up without yelling. He would give you the space to make sure that it was the ultimate safe space to just play, be a kid, make mistakes. It was such an incredible experience to be able to just learn and not have like the slings and arrows that I feel like a lot of these young people are experiencing now. Like, we were so protected and safe, and we could just figure ourselves out in ways that I feel like these kids are like so watched now.
Yeah.
We weren't like, nothing streamed live. You know what I'm saying? Like, the internet wasn't watching us. Like, we could just mess up, and like, then somebody like Hamrick would tap you on the shoulder and be like, oh, do it like this. Or like Kid Cash would be like, next time, and I think it was so valuable because like you could screw up and somebody would lovingly tell you what you did wrong and how to do it better next time. And you didn't have somebody on the internet armchair quarterbacking. You had a loved family member just giving you advice instead. And I think that's why all of us have this longevity, because not only did we have that, we also had the safety of, there were no weird men around us, because, the older men, the fathers and uncle figures in our life didn't allow that shit. Like, it was just, we were loved, we were protected, we were kept safe. And it was just such a blessing. I can't say enough about the type of person Jason is. I can't say enough about the type of person Chris Hamrick is. I can't say enough about the type of person Kid Cash is. Like, I can't say enough about the type of person that New Jack is. God rest him. Balls Mahoney, God rest him. I mean, all of these, Axel Rotten, God rest him, all of these wonderful people that raised me in the business. I am so unbelievably blessed because they were phenomenal mentors, and really, really lucky to have been able to sit under the learning tree of these men. Really, really fortunate.
Wow. So much to unpack there. So much to unpack. 23-ish years old, and you have to tell this locker room of men what to do. You would expect most men would be like, you know, who is this little lady right here telling me what to do? You know what I mean? Like that's you got to learn to have some balls very quickly. Me, I work with a coworker for my 12-hour shifts that I do. I have a hard time, I don't like telling people what to do, even though I'm supposed to be telling them what to do. So I ended up doing everything. That's just me. But like at that age, to have that thrown at you, man, that's how you learn. Like you have to, you're forced to. And another thing that you said that was really poignant to me was him making you figure it out for yourself, and not giving you the answer, making you figure it out for yourself. That is so important, I think. Instead of, having your little tushy wiped there, you know what I mean? Like having like somebody like watch after you and look after you and cradle you. No, like throw them out there and make them. And eventually, you'll get those lessons because you have to, you're forcing yourself to. So that all of that whole story that you just told was just like one of the best stories. I've had 170 guests on this show, and that was one of the best stories I've ever heard of somebody coming through and getting into the business. Thank you so much for all of that information, Shannon. Really, really cool. I have this whole idea of the theme of this interview that I wanted to go through. And if you want to branch off and talk about this, talk about that, go for it. No problem. But again, I want to talk about lessons and your favorite and worst memory of each place. And when I say worst memory, it could be like something like just a frustrating experience from what you're doing in your job, which it happens all the time. So Jersey All Pro, you said you started there in 1999. Do you have lessons that you can talk about and your favorite and worst memory there?
So lessons from Jersey All Pro. The lesson is that when your boss creates a familial atmosphere, and I know this is true, like, because it's happening at XPW, the people turn out healthier, right? So Fat Frank and Jeff Shapiro owned Jersey All Pro, and they cared so deeply about the people that worked there. So what ended up happening is you saw less drug abuse, you saw less injuries, you saw people that deeply cared about each other, and you have seen over the past 25, 30 years, friendships that have stood the test of time. I still talk to almost everybody I met at JAP. It's been 25 years.
That's rare because most people say they can't count 5 friends on their hand at the end of their time in wrestling. So that's really interesting.
So the lesson is when you create an atmosphere where people really care about each other and love each other, people are healthier, their friendships are stronger, and they come out of the business with, more positive feelings, not only about wrestling, but about themselves as people. One of the things about JP was there were a lot of young wrestlers, people that were 13, 14, 15 years old that were wrestling, Dixie and Blue and, a lot of those younger kids that, were in that group at ROH, you remember, right?
Of course, yeah.
So they all were JP students, all those kids. So what ended up happening with those kids is the whole point was they were being raised to not only be great wrestlers, but good people that were going to have good lives after wrestling. And I think that was Frank's philosophy. That was Magic's philosophy. That was Rick Silver's philosophy. So I think that was the lesson. Like if you create a good atmosphere, you're going to have good people coming out of the situation. And I think I know that's true because Rob Black is doing the same thing. Because it's a very close familial locker room, and we're seeing the same situation come out where all these good people are just spreading good things out into the universe. My favorite memory, I'm trying to think there's so many. I mean, favorite memory, gosh. Honestly, travel, because trips that you would do, and just outside of the wrestling stuff, it was the most fun, being in hotels with people. I used to love to, wake up in the morning and, I was always an early bird back then. So I was always be up before anybody else, and, just walking around, the hotels, and, everybody be sleeping, and, just have that moment to really, before everybody woke up. I also, I remember meeting Trent Acid for the first time was really funny because I was in a hotel room with Christy Kiss, and Trent was looking for Billy Real, and somebody had told them, Billy and Johnny, that he was with us. So we were getting ready for the show, and I always was dressed really sexy for the shows. So I was in lingerie, and I opened the door, and Trent and Johnny were standing at the door. And Verdi, even years later, could tell you exactly the lingerie I was wearing. It was so burned into his memory. But yeah, so those are the favorite memories, not necessarily the memories at the shows, but memories,
personal memories. Yeah,
personal memories. I think the hardest stuff for me at JP was, and Frank, if he was alive, would tell you this, was, at that time, it could be hard on women because there was only a couple of us, and there was some sense of misogyny, and, some sense of sexual impropriety and things like that went on, that Frank then did apologize to me for way later. So I think that was the hardest thing, and one of the reasons why I did leave, because I was one of those people that if love wasn't being served, I got up from the table, because I was older when I got into the business. I was 22, and I think, which isn't really that old, but it was old enough for me to have that sort of self-esteem where I was just I'm not going to put up with a lot of bullshit. So that would be what I would say was something that I didn't love as much. But that was typical of the times. I would say a lot of women of my generation would say that was also a thing for them too.
Absolutely. Of course, a lot of people say, oh, it was a different time. Yeah, it definitely was. You can't do that stuff now, that's for sure. But thank you for sharing all that. And I wanted to bring it to the doghouse, which you had mentioned before. Again, we're keeping with the theme, lessons, favorite and worst memory.
Oh, lessons from the doghouse. Lessons from the doghouse. That's such an interesting question. I think for me, the lesson from the doghouse was discipline, because like for me, it took a lot. First of all, like the discipline of the people that were there, because they all had to be there every Saturday, right? Like to train, right? I mean, they were there during the week training, but there was a show every Saturday, a showcase every Saturday that was open to the public, and, tickets were sold and, everything like that. But like, for me, like in order to build trust with those people, like I had to show up. And I had to make that trip from Manhattan. It took me like 3 trains all the way into Brooklyn and sit there all night. And then like at 3:00 in the morning, go back. And so for me, it was the discipline of doing that every Saturday, that I wasn't booked somewhere else. And it's like, even though you're a kid and you have stamina, like sometimes there's other shit you'd rather be doing. Like, and so like, for me, it was the discipline, and it was part of the dues paying process of, if you want these people to love and trust you, you have to be there. You have to be there, even if you're tired, even if you want to be doing something else, even if, like you want to go out on a date, like you have to have that discipline. So I think that was the lesson I took from the doghouse. Like they have the discipline, they're there training. So like, you have to be there too. Like you have to have that discipline as well. So that was the lesson there for me. I mean, the best parts of it for me were building the relationships with those people, because candidly, those are the best people I ever met in wrestling. Louis Ramos once got in a cab from Queens with a humongous TV. Like, you remember those TVs? Like, I don't know if you had them in Australia, but they were like fucking tanks. And like, and like my TV broke, and he like traveled like in a cab from like Queens to Manhattan because my TV broke, and like he brought me this TV. And like, like I have tons of stories of like people from the doghouse saving my ass, and it's just like, these people never let me down, so it's just, I'm so lucky with my friendships from the doghouse, because, these are the people that always have your back, no matter what. And I think my happiest memories are, just walking down the street for pizza, at intermission. Or there was this lady that sold pastries like out of her front yard, and like right before the show started, we would all go and get pastries from her, her little cart, and then take them back and eat them during the show. And Bobby Lombardi, who owned the company, used to sit like right at the front steps, like as you would come in, and that was his spot. And he would sit at the front steps, and, like I would always make it a point to like sit down on the step with Bobby and talk to him every show, and like, just, like get like soak up the life wisdom, because he owned several businesses, and he was such a brilliant man. And, I think those are my happiest memories. I remember like one of the guys, his wife was pregnant, and like he had brought her to the show because, he didn't want to leave her home alone. It was their first baby. And he was like, he told her to stay next to me because he was the only person in the building he trusted. And, it was just stuff like that, little things like that. I think my worst memory is when Russ Haas died. Oh. And I, in the building, standing next to the practice ring when we all found out. And it's one of those moments where you just don't forget it. And it has nothing to do with the doghouse specifically. It's just a moment where we were all together when a tragedy happened, and you're just standing there and you kind of don't know what to do, and everybody's just sort of like standing there looking at each other like, and so that was particularly horrible because and again, I can see that memory, like I just remember somebody running in going, "Oh my God, Russ died." And we're just all looking at each other like, wait, what? So that's probably the worst memory. Cause like nothing bad ever happened at the doghouse. Like Bobby was like a fucking pit bull. Like he created a force field around that place. So like it was damn near impossible to have a bad moment or memory at the doghouse. You know what I'm saying? Like that's, I think, why everybody remembers it so fondly, because he protected all of us so forcefully. Candidly, you'll find this interesting probably. I hate funerals. And so a lot of people I know have died in wrestling, a lot. But I've only ever been to one funeral, and that's Bobby Lombardi's. Because there was no way I was not going to show my respect to the greatest man I ever knew.
All right. Wow. I think maybe from here on, I'll get you to say the worst memory first before the favorite one, so we can end each chapter here on a better note.
On a positive note.
Oh my gosh. As you were talking about that, I quickly Googled things. I can't believe Russ was 27. No, that's...
Yeah. And so that's why we were all so surprised, because we were like, what went wrong here?
Oh, gosh. Crazy. This is wrestling business. This is very prevalent. And if you've been in it 25 years, you've been through all these locker rooms, working with all these people, you're bound to know at least 50 to 100 people that are probably passed on. So
yep.
That heartache is all the way through this journey, as well as the good times that we've been talking about here as well. So I wanted to bring it now to JCW. Again, lessons, favorite, worst memories.
So what's fun about JCW? So what people know now as JCW bears no resemblance to what JCW was. Ricky O was the owner of JCW for years and years and years. And so Ricky O and Fat Frank were like, if you think about The Sopranos, that's pretty much what Jersey wrestling looked like in the 90s and 2000s. Actually, Ricky O and Fat Frank were both extras in The Sopranos. No, they really were.
Really? Oh my God.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
It's my favorite show.
Yeah, they were extras in The Sopranos. And wow. So they were very mafiosi type guys, and very Italian, New Jersey guys. And so Ricky ran that company like, and not in a super negative way, but ran that company like Tony Soprano would have run his business. And he had what we called stooges that would run around and do things for you and help you and pick you up from the airport and get you coffee and things like that. And so a lesson that I learned was from Ricky was how to run a business and how to run an organization and how to not only get people to do things for you, but how to treat them so that they would continue to want to be a part of your organization. Because Ricky did not mistreat people. He treated people very well. And that's why people wanted to continue to be a part of his organization, not just wrestling for him, but working for him in a support capacity. And I think that was such an important lesson for me. Ricky was a wonderful businessman. He was very intelligent. He knew how to run his business. He made good money. He made smart business decisions. He was very successful for a lot of years. He did not mistreat people. He didn't do shady things. And so I think that he really taught me so much about how to run a business and how to treat people with respect. And I think that was the big lesson that I learned. And also how many people it takes to run a medium to large size wrestling company. Because I think JP was such a family business in a certain way that I don't think, and so was the Doghouse, that I didn't really understand until I got to JCW, that how many people it took to run a medium to large size wrestling company. And that was a huge thing to learn and understand. Favorite memories, honestly, those shows were just so high quality. So, Jersey J Cups, where like, CM Punk is coming in and Daniel Bryan is coming in, and, there's just all this excitement and I mean, those were the first big splashy, exciting, like, wrestling shows that I ever worked where like it's name wrestling time. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it was interesting and exciting to be a part of that and to learn how to navigate that and to and also with Ricky, what was really fun too is there was a culture of let's all be together after the show. So we would all go out to dinner, and those special times when we would all be sitting around a table at a Fridays or an Applebee's or whatever. And it was egalitarian, like, the star would come out too, and I think those are also incredibly special times, because those are the times when you really get to know people really well, and you really get to understand them, and Reckless Youth and all of those people from New Jersey that you would, remember. I got to know them and work with them then. And it was a very special time. I really enjoyed that time. I think worst memory was that I was just very restless being a photographer. I knew there was more out there for me. And that was a point in my life where I was just like ready to move. Yeah. Cause like I had gotten my master's and, super educated, and I just knew that I was ready to do more. And again, and this is not anything about any of the people I ever worked for very early in my career. The opportunities for women to do what I do did not exist then. I mean, they barely exist now. So like, so that would be that,
Right. Very cool. Well, thank you for again sharing all that. And I'm going to take a quick sidebar here with you and ask you, for the layman out there that doesn't quite understand, how do you run a locker room?
How do you run a locker room? I think everybody's philosophy is different. So for me, I am incredibly organized in a way that perhaps some people aren't, and maybe perhaps a lot of men aren't, which is why I tend to get hired a lot. So
we're useless.
Not necessarily, but
some
like
are good.
I have a tendency to really be intensely organized, so that people know, way ahead of time who their referee is, how much time they have. I really push promoters to pay ahead of time if they can. back in the day it was envelopes. Now people are paying digitally. When they get there, I try to make sure that things like there's enough chairs, there's water, there's separate bathroom facilities if that's possible in the building. I'm making sure that the card is posted with their referee and their time information. I'm having personal conversations with each athlete to make sure that they know what's expected of them. I am liaising with the front office to make sure that the ticketing is taken care of. I am making sure that if there is a list of comps that that's taken care of. I am making sure that if the athletes have concerns about things, like if they're unhappy with who they're working, if they are concerned about what they're being asked to do, that I am liaising with the promoter to allay those concerns. So there's a lot of things that go into running a locker room. I'm also making sure that people know that they have to keep to their times because, they're disrespecting each other if they don't. I'm talking to the promoter about how long the intermission needs to be, if we're having an intermission. I'm talking to the athletes about, do they have merch to sell? Who's watching their merch while they're wrestling? I'm talking to security and making sure if we have security. I'm talking to security about de-escalation. I'm talking to them about how we handle incidents. I'm talking to them if I think there may be an incident based on, what's planned, or if wrestlers may go into the audience. Do we have barricades? Do we not have barricades? So there's more that goes into it that people may think. I may be liaising with the people that do catering for various reasons, whether I'm concerned about something or whether the wrestlers may need food or whatever have you. So there's a lot of different things that go into it. Do you have questions about that? Because sometimes people have specific questions about what it means to run a locker room, and I'd be interested to know if you have questions.
The only things that were actually popping in my mind just now were, gosh, it must be so much easier these days on your phone where you can liaise with everyone very quickly. Whereas in the mid 2000s, it might not be as easy to do that, or even earlier than that. It's
actually, I actually, you still have to walk up to people and have conversations. Because a lot of times, at least in the United States, these venues, the Wi-Fi is terrible.
Oh.
And also when people are working, they're not necessarily going to be picking up their phone. So a lot of times, moving around and having personal conversations, and also, a personal conversation goes a long way when you walk up to somebody and you talk to them and you thank them, and a lot of times that really goes a long way with people.
Right. So what worked back then still works now. You don't need to be going on your phone. Okay. Look, I have no idea. I have no idea how to run a proper locker room in pro wrestling. I made an assumption and you debunked it. Very well done, Shannon. So that's cool. For everyone out there who might be a bit confused, because there are more than one JCW, this is Jersey Championship Wrestling that became Game Changer Wrestling. Is that correct?
No. So Game Changer Wrestling is a thing. Jersey Championship Wrestling still exists under the banner of Game Changer Wrestling, right?
Okay.
And so Brett bought it from Riccio.
Okay. Right.
So you'll see JCW shows being run GCW weekends, especially at Showboat.
Oh, okay.
They're very different from what we did back in the day. Very, very super different. But it's a brand underneath the GCW banner currently.
Okay, so now I'm learning even more. That's good. And also everyone, it was never Juggalo Championship Wrestling, if that's what you're thinking. Which is another JCW that's out there. Okay, so the next thing, you've talked a little bit about some of these things that you've learned. You learned how to run a business and things of that nature. And you're obviously quite educated, and you've been so obsessed with wrestling, you're ready to get to that next level. And I'm skipping a little bit ahead here, but you talked to me earlier with some notes that you sent me about helping start Delaware Championship Wrestling with Jeff Rocker. Tell me about that process of just going into this new venture.
So years prior, I had done like a show or two with the old CZW under John Zandig.
Yeah.
And I didn't do a lot of that because John and Fat Frank didn't get along. So Frank always discouraged me from going over there. But so I did a couple because Cashmere and Trent had said to me, hey, come down. We'd really love to have you. So, but I met Jeff Rocker, who I refer to as Rock. I met Rock then. And so Rock and I had maintained a friendship throughout that time. And then Rock came to work for Jason Knight at Assault Championship Wrestling. So then we continued to be very close friends. And then when Rock decided to start his company in Delaware, he said, shit, come help me, because like I'm only one person. So Rock and I, started to create this structure for DCW. DCW still exists, by the way. And they're a beautiful company. And but Rock and I created DCW, and it was sort of based around students that he had at the time, and some name people, including like Mickey James and some other folks that we had. A fun story here. So he had originally booked Homicide for it was like maybe the first or second show, but D double booked himself. And it was like a hardcore match or something. And Rock said to me, well, who can we get to replace D? And I said, there's only one person we can get to replace D. And he's like, don't say it. And I was like, there's only one person, Justice Payne. Well, Jeff and Justice Payne did not get along. And I'm like, I don't really care if you like Chris, we have to book him. Well, so it ended up Chris worked there for like 5 fucking years because, number one, Chris was just an amazing guy. He was so loyal. He was so hardworking. And I just love that motherfucker so much. I mourn him so hard because he was just the best person. But, I am a Justice Payne fan for life because he did everything for us. And truly, deeply, he and Jeff never did get along, but he was just awesome to the rest of us. And he was, and I will say this until the end of time, Justice Payne was the most chivalrous human being I've ever met in wrestling. He could be very cantankerous with other men. There's no lie in that. But if you were a woman, he was the kindest, warmest, most chivalrous person I ever met in my life. I will never forget when Velvet Sky broke up with this guy she was dating, Dylan Cage. And Dylan was working Justice Payne. And so Chris said to Jamie, hey, I want you to come out and watch this match. And Jamie and I were like, huh. So this was at DCW. So Jamie and I were like standing there watching this match, and like all of a sudden, like it turned into this like Pier 6 brawl. And then Chris pulls Dylan into the concession stand and dumps every condiment on this kid in the entire concession stand, completely ruins his gear. And Jamie and I were looking at each other like, Like, he was the sweetest guy, like the most chivalrous person. Like, if he loved you, he loved you. Like, and he was the most loyal person. And so I always used to say, like, if there was one person on earth that I would like to see again, it's Justice Payne. Like, he was just my favorite person I ever worked with, really and truly. He really was.
Oh, that's lovely to hear. And, pretty much everyone I've had on the show that has had a story to tell about him has said something very positive. So good to keep putting out those positive vibes into the universe for him. So again, obviously Delaware Championship Wrestling's pretty important, time in your life there. Again, do you have any extra lessons that you've learned from there, and also worst and favorite memories?
Favorite memory is that I met one of the great loves of my life there. He, we were young and we didn't stay together, but he and I are still really close friends, and I just feel very lucky to have had a relationship that awesome, that early in my life. His name is Chris Wild, and just an immensely great person, an immensely great athlete. But so that's where he and I met, and I would not have had that experience in my life without being there. He was a student of Jeff Rocker's, and just feel lucky to have met him. But yeah, one of the absolutely great loves of my life, and I would not trade him for the world. So definitely that awesome experience. Worst memory, I honestly can't think of one, candidly. I mean, there are no bad memories from DCW. I always used to call us the Delaware Clique, because like, we, again, very close, very familial group of people. Even when Jeff decided to leave the business, we all hung together and kept the place open. The place is still open. All of those people are still close friends. I think the proof is in the pudding, because they're all excellent people, and I think there's just a lot of, they were all trained well, they were all loved well, they're all good business people, they're all good people. And I think that, Jeff did a good job. I feel like I'm very proud of what we did. I'm very proud of what everybody there is doing, but I can't think of any bad memories. I mean, everything was fun. Like, when you say living the dream, like, that was living the dream. Like, we were just so happy to go to work, because we all just enjoyed each other so much. Like, we would do Halloween shows, and we would dress up, and, like, in costumes, and like, it was just fucking fun, man. Like, that's how you want it to be. Nobody's drinking excessively, nobody's doing drugs. Like, the audience is full of kids and families, and like, it's just fucking fun, man. Like, it's what wrestling is about. And I think, I think I was very lucky to have that experience, because, not many people, and my career evolved then too, because, they got to see me evolve from a photographer to running a show to ring announcing to managing. So like, my career completely evolved while I was at DCW. So like, they got to see me run the gamut of who I became in the business. So I think that was so fun for me, for them, for the fans. And I think my lesson there was, that I could be anything that I wanted to be. And they gave me the space to be anything that I wanted to be, that I could ring announce, that I could manage, that I could, just sort of do whatever I wanted to be. Because I think a lot of times, especially as women, you're sort of pigeonholed into one spot. And I think my career is proof positive that there's no reason for you to be. Like, I've done everything. So there's no reason to be pigeonholed into one spot. Like, there's absolutely no reason for that, because I've done everything that you could possibly imagine, and I've been good at it and successful at it.
That is awesome. I love it. Continuing on, you co-own another wrestling company with Eddie Valentine. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
So WPW was owned by a guy named Pinky Flamingo when I started working there. And so I worked there for an extended period of time. And then Pinky started to have some problems. And he came to me and Eddie and he said, "Would you like to buy the company?" And we looked at each other and we were like, yeah. So, Eddie, myself, and another guy named Tony Dalton, who was doing the technical aspects, we purchased a company, and we ran out of Reading, Pennsylvania. And we were quite successful for quite a few years. And in 2013, Eddie's husband had a very severe illness. So we had to take a break, which ended up leading to us folding. But those were the happiest years of my life. One of the fun things about working with somebody like Eddie is that we just laughed all the time, because when you're working with somebody that's your best friend, that you really like everything is funny. Even when bad shit happens, everything is funny. So I remember Rory Gulak climbing a ladder and the ladder slipping out from under him, and it literally fell into the crowd, and I'm on commentary, and I remember all I hear is back behind me in the locker room, I hear Eddie start screaming and cursing, and that was funny. Everything is funny. Everything is funny. No matter what happens, everything is funny. Those crowds were so unbelievably hot, because those are the crowds, the very old school crowds. You ever see the old school crowds from the NWA where Jim Cornette and Baby Doll and stuff were getting attacked? I get attacked all the time, because I was a full-time manager then. And I was doing a Christian fundamentalist gimmick at that point. And I used to get attacked all the time. One time I got pulled off the ring apron doing a spot, and I turned around and it was this little old lady with no teeth. So I couldn't hit her or anything. And my photographer was grabbing her, ma'am, you have to let go, because she had me by the hair and she wouldn't let go. And it was the craziest thing, because she stopped me from doing the spot, and the guy I was managing was looking down, and we couldn't do anything, because I can't smack the shit out of this lady, because she's 9,000 years old. But that shit used to happen all the time, because these people, it was real to them, because it was Reading, and it was kind of a rural place, the internet really hadn't touched there, Right. And I remember doing a show in a gay club, and one of the drag queens was a ring announcer, and they hadn't smartened her up. And we were doing this one particular spot where we were hanging this one little gay kid on a cross, very similar to what we did with Body in
Slack.
Yeah. And so they didn't smarten up the ring announcer, who was a drag queen. Don't you know this woman came in and knocked the fuck out of me while I was cutting this promo. And the guy that was working with me, didn't know what to do. So he grabbed the mic out of my hand and finished cutting the promo. I was like, thanks, dude. But like, so stuff like that used to happen to me all the time at WPW because the crowds were so hot. But everything was funny. Everything was funny. We just laughed. We had a good time. We got so much heat. Like, it was, for me, it was one of the most fruitful creative times because Eddie was such a great writer, and he found in me a performer who could do anything, so anything he wrote, I could perform it. And I think it was really fun for him because like whatever outrageous stuff he wanted to do, I was there for it. And I think it was fun for both of us. And it was an exciting time, and we both just really enjoyed ourselves. And, a lot of it you couldn't do now because everybody is so like tight. But but we had a lot of fun, and it was a creative and exciting time.
Yes, it's so frustrating the way it is these days. That's why I really love watching XPW. I know a lot of people out there just because they've heard about things and have watched Dark Side of the Ring or whatever, they immediately, it's just so shit, it's shit. But I watch it because I'm like, they do things that like actually like, I don't know, it's like something for an adult to watch. I don't want to watch, as Schlack said to me when I interviewed him, wrestling where the baby powder's been put up the ass. I can't stand that over sanitized, like squeaky clean wrestling. I want something to sink my teeth into. I want something that's controversial, and things are going to make me mad, and it's okay that they make me mad because people like that make you mad, they actually do exist in real life. But they don't want anyone to be on a level of garnering hate that's insulting to them. But hate can be done in a different way. They don't need to go that. Yes, they do, because if you watch Law and Order, okay, you watch these TV shows with actual crimes taking place, the bad guy, people don't watch that show and get all upset because the rapist, raped somebody or whatever. It's an act of portraying something. I'm not saying wrestling needs to have something like that happen, but it's just an example. Something bad happens on a show, things like that happen in real life. I remember once I watched The Sopranos, big fan of the show. Ralphie beat one of the strippers to death, just hitting her, and I was so upset I couldn't eat my dinner. I must have been about in my early 20s, but I was so upset about it. But I wasn't going to complain about it and send in a letter or anything like that. But it was something that was confronting for me, and I had to deal with it. And guess what? Ralphie got his comeuppance eventually because Tony killed him. So that's what I wanted to say about that, is that I just missed when wrestling companies could actually do real heat and do things that actually upset people. So that you just brought out a bit of passion in me there, Shannon. So thank you. Okay, so very cool. We're getting towards the tail end here, Shannon, but of course there's two big companies that I need to ask you about. Combat Zone Wrestling, first and foremost. How did you get involved with CZW?
So DJ and I have been friends for over 15 years. And so when they came back from the pandemic, DJ and I had a conversation, and I said, I'd like to work for you. And he said, yeah, that's a good idea. And my role just has evolved over time because, I'm sure you've seen on Twitter, people are like, oh, indie wrestling needs PR and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, I can do that. So I do PR, I do, a lot of customer service functions, but in CZW especially, I do talent relations on the deathmatch side. And so I am sort of liaising with the athletes. I am the first line of defense in terms of choosing which athletes come into the company, things like that, doing sponsorships, all of that stuff. So, if it's deathmatch and CZW, I'm generally handling it.
Very cool, very cool. So through doing that, and this isn't anything against any of the other companies, but like this feels like this is a name. Like CZW is a big name in especially deathmatch, of course. When that was one of the first ones in the USA that really inspired a lot of people that ended up getting into that field or that kind of style of pro wrestling. So to be in a company on that scale, how was it? Not only getting involved with that and the lessons you learned, but also dealing with, I don't know, were you there during the time period of COVID and all that, or did you come in after that?
So I came in sort of in the middle of COVID, and so we were sort of resetting. And I think, it's such an interesting thing. I think too, as a woman, I think in deathmatch, I think people would not have expected me to have the role that I have. I think I may be the only woman that I'm doing this job. I'm sure people will write in and correct me if there's somebody else, but I think for the most part, I'm the only woman executive level in deathmatch for the most part. There is, at least in the higher companies, there's a woman, in Michigan, her name is Rachel, and she runs Horror Slam. But like, in terms of like, my level, I think, at the very least, I was one of the first. So I think it took a long time for people to go, okay, we trust you and we understand what you do. And because I just came in like, the proverbial Miley Cyrus wrecking ball. And I didn't really like shoot out my resume and say, this is who I am and this is what I do. And I was hired to do this. I just started going on the Facebook groups and doing the PR and everything like that. And, because I was just like, I've been in the business 25 years. I really don't give a fuck. I'm just going to do my job and you're either going to accept it or you're not. And so, I mean, it really was only like fairly recently, like a couple of weeks ago, one of the fans was like, so what exactly do you do? And I was like, here's exactly what I do. And they were like, oh, all right. But like, I didn't come in with like any set job description. Like, I just was like, I'm going to be here and do the thing. And whatever the thing is, we'll just figure it out as we go along, because it's indie wrestling. Like, you just sort of pitch in where you can. I mean, the thing that I was supposed to do fundamentally was take care of the talent, because I'm a talent relations person and I run the locker room. And so, initially I was overarching over the whole company. And then, so I was going to all of the shows, right? And then at a certain point I said to DJ, I need to focus on death. And that was a really, really smart decision. So once I pivoted to just death, I think my career took a really great turn. And then I want to say a year and a half, almost 2 years ago now, when Rob Black was rebooting XPW, I was excited about the project. I started retweeting stuff and everything. And then Rob hit me up on Twitter in a DM and he's like, hey, you seem like a really cool person. Thank you for, helping out and everything like that. And then one of the people that works with him lives in Manhattan and hit me up and was like, hey, can we do lunch? And I said, yeah, that'd be great. So I did lunch with him. And then while we were at lunch, this gentleman said, Rob never answers his phone, but while we're here, maybe I'll give him a call and see, if you could talk to him. Well, Rob answered his phone. And so I talked to Rob. And so that was how my relationship with XPW started. And it just sort of evolved. And then when they started doing shows in Newark, I was able to be there in person. And of course, once you're there in person, then that sort of cements the relationship, because I had been working sort of remotely before then and just doing, light PR and things like that. And then we had some incidents where like PR needed to be very heavy. Like there was a problem with Dirty Ron and, a problem with Masada. And then, once that problem with Brig hit, I got a call from Rob and he's like, are you sure you want this job? And I was like, yeah, sure do. And Rob was like, okay, we're doing it. And I feel like that was when I really sort of cemented myself in the organization. But I mean, Rob and Katie and I are very close. I was at their wedding, and Katie came for her birthday, and we all spent time together. I talk to Katie every day, and I talk to Rob all the time, when there's not shows, and they're very loving and supportive with me. And, I just feel very lucky to be a part of the XPW family. I love the work I do for XPW. I am incredibly lucky to work for CZW. And here's why. DJ has given me the opportunity to do things that no other woman in wrestling, especially indie wrestling and deathmatch, has been able to do. I was able to, book a TOD. I was able to, really, I'm making a difference in American deathmatch. And I feel like women, unless they're working, are not allowed to do that. Like, I really have influence and say, and he's listening to me in a way that other women don't have that ability. And I'm just very grateful for him, and grateful for his grace, and grateful for, the opportunities that he's given me, because, really a lot of other men would have just been like, well, you'll be my secretary, and that is not what I'm doing at all, not even a little bit. And I think that, he's been very gracious and very good at allowing me to just do my job, and, let me take care of the things that he knows that I'm good at. And I think it takes a lot of you have to be a certain type of person to take your ego out of it. You know what I'm saying? And just let a woman do what they do, because I think it's so easy to like let a Maven Bentley or a Derek Sabato do these things. But when it's a woman, I feel like there's some extra element of mental gymnastics that goes with it. And I think that he has navigated that super well. And he's just like, go do your job and I have your back. And it's been an incredible experience, and I'm super lucky. And I think the only drawback for me has just been, it's not hard to work for DJ. It's hard to work for CZW, because CZW comes with this baggage that, people are angry about things that came before me that I don't understand or have knowledge about, or don't understand the history of, and have nothing to do with me. And I'm still trying to navigate that somehow. I will say that the people that run the groups, like Andy Lawler, are wonderful to me, and they're wonderful at saying, hey, stop giving this girl bullshit, but I that would be the only drawback for me. Like, it's not about my boss. It's about people who are angry about things that happened years ago that have nothing to do with me, and that I can't fix. Like, I can only fix now. Like, I can't fix what you're angry about from 10 years ago or 5 years ago or whatever. Like, I can only make now amazing. And so, like, that would be the only drawback for CZW for me. For XPW, there really is no drawbacks. XPW is a great place to work. Everybody is amazing. One of the things I love about Rob, especially doing PR, is I am the type of person who hates to apologize for shit. And XPW, the PR philosophy overarching is, we are who we are, and we're not going to say we're sorry. And so that really aligns with my philosophy as a PR person also. And so it's been it's been great to work for somebody who aligns with your philosophy on how you work as well. So, I think for me, I think he's a brilliant guy. He's very unapologetic. He knows where he's headed, business wise. He has a plan, and he's a very much trust the process person. And so, and he also cares deeply about all of this. And I think that's what overarching, I want people to know about both Rob and DJ. And that's why they actually get along. They're both incredibly warm and caring people that care deeply about us and want us to have a good experience, want us to be successful, and, want the best for everybody that works for them. And I think that's what people on the outside don't necessarily understand about what's going on internally at either company.
Very, very interesting. And it's just crazy that you're with both the companies at the same time. So, I mean, that's props to you. I mean, that's a lot of work to do. And I'd love the whole philosophy. I love the whole philosophy of not giving a shit. And this is who we are. If you don't like it, guess what? You don't have to watch. You don't have to look at our Twitter. You can block us if you don't like it. I see it every time after every single, especially the XPW events. There's always this tribe of people with their pitchforks out trying to do something to disrupt, the joy that XPW has in showing what they produced on that particular show. And I look at all those comments and I'm like, you didn't even watch the show. You saw like a 30-second clip. So, these people, who gives a shit what they think? They're very, very, very vocal minority. And so I dig the attitude.
The mayhem. There's always something. One of the fun things about XPW is there's always something that happens on every show that causes some sort of fucking mayhem, whether it's JJ, falling off the balcony and breaking his back, or I was deeply involved in that situation. I helped him play on the spot, and then I had to take care of him after that. Or it's the needle spot with Joe and hard body. So that was actually funny because that happened the same show as JJ breaking his back. And I will never forget them coming backstage and Rob saying to Joe, "Did you touch his cock?" And Joe going, "Of course I did." And Rob going, "Well, you didn't have to do all that." There's always some mayhem happening every fucking show. Like there's always some wild situation, incident, that there's never a show where we're just like, oh, well, that was kind of boring. Like XPW is boring. Like there's always some, wild thing happening. The one show, the last show that it was so hot in there, all of a sudden, like there was a loud bang and like we lost power, and it was because the air conditioner blew up, and it was a whole big thing. And and then that was the night we crucified Body too. And there's always like at least 3 incidents, like you can count on it every show. But like I feel like that's why people, have a tendency to watch. I mean, my personal favorite moment of every XPW show is Necro's entrance, and everybody's singing.
Yeah, me too. I just laugh so much.
Like, even if you're not like into that, like people still sing it anyways, because like you get caught up in the moment. Like, it's just like, it's so like exciting and like fun and an experience. Like It's really,
his
really
entrance is it is sickeningly patriotic. Sickeningly.
it's so like, I don't know how to describe what it's like to be in the building for that, but it's like one of the coolest special moments. It's like I don't know how to describe it, but it's just like, it's so dope. And like, I wish that everybody could experience it like at least once in their life. Like it's really, really fun.
Oh, I wish too. I've watched every single show since XPW returned, and I just want to be there. But of course, I live in Perth, Western Australia, so I want to be at a Halloween in Hell. I want to be at one of those big shows. That to me would be certainly a an experience. I want to be having some cold beers in the crowd there watching the show.
And one of my other favorite experiences is, when when Big Joe or like somebody else is coming out, somebody that the crowd really likes, especially in Heart, because like that crowd can get so loud. I mean, just the sound in that building can be so thunderous. It's really incredible to hear when people are cattail. It can be incredibly thunderous to hear when people are excited about something. Now, as far as CZW goes, I think my best moment was, everybody knows, and this is sort of an inside joke now, everybody knows that Orin Veit is my favorite wrestler. Right. And people tease me about it and they tease him about it. But listen, one of the things that I would like to say is that we are all people. And like, listen, we have favorite people that we like to work with. Like, I don't think that any promoter would tell you that like, oh, I don't have a favorite. Of course we do. Of course we do. And I think, candidly, I think it's okay to be honest about it. I think it's okay to say like, I like this guy. He's my favorite person to work with. Like, he's my favorite person to watch. I think it's okay to be honest about like who we enjoy. Like, I think it's dumb not to say that. So Orin Veit is my favorite wrestler, and I had worked excessively hard to get him on TOD last year. Just because like we needed to get his flight together and everything. And so when Friends in Low Places hit last year, like I literally was standing next to DJ's wife, and DJ's wife said, "Oh my God, I love this song." And she looked over at me and she was like, "Are you crying?" And I was like, "Yes, you don't understand how hard it was." But yeah, so like it was probably one of the best moments of my career, because I was really excited to get him on the show, and like I just thought his performance was really incredible. I was so proud of it, and I can't wait for you guys to see him in the tournament again this year. I think one of the best memories for me too was just Bobby in general. DJ had during the pandemic, he had really not been paying attention to what was going on in Deathmatch. So he wasn't super familiar with Bobby. So when I booked Bobby and he announced Bobby, Bobby sold the whole front row in 45 minutes last year, just off the strength of his name. And DJ was like, "This is insane." And I was like, "I told you, Bev is the one." So that was like one of my favorite moments. And then when we got to the show last year and told Bev he was winning, that was a really, really unique moment. I don't know if you've seen like the videos of him walking away with the trophy and, just the look on his face, and, it was so special to him. And I remember for months after, people congratulating him. And then like I saw him like a month later at XPW and people walking up to him and congratulating him. And, like TOD still means something. And I will never lose sight of that because I feel like DJ and I are a steward of something that is so important to people, to fans, to the workers, to history. So like, I will never lose sight of something that still means something to people, that's important to people. And like, I'm not going to not work hard to make it special. Like, when we announced Joe Dredd this year, we were like, okay, like, how do we want to do this? Well, we had the graphic and it was Joe Dredd's birthday. So we said, we're going to announce Joe Dredd on his birthday. And it ended up being so special for him because he really wanted to be in the tournament, and then we announced him on his birthday and he's like, this is the best birthday ever. And it's just like, when you can do that for people, it just makes it all the hard stuff seem easier, like, look, I get it. It's just wrestling, man. But like, for a lot of people, this stuff means something. And like, to the extent that it does, I really want to try to make things special for people whenever I can. And, like I said, TOD means something to people and people want to be in the tournament and they want to go to it. And so like, I feel like I'm a steward of that and DJ is a steward of that. And it's important. And we want to continue to create a great experience for everybody. And like, I want to do that with COD and I want to make sure that CZW continues to be great because there are a lot of people, both dead and alive, who worked really hard to make that banner mean something. And they bled black and yellow for many, many years. And I want to make sure that it continues to be great. We've had a tough year and I understand that people are disappointed, but whatever people choose to believe, those things were not our fault. So, I think that a lot of other companies would have taken a knee or completely folded under these circumstances, but DJ and I do not have quit in us. And we are going to continue to create the best shows possible for the fans, the workers, and for the people who believe in us. And that's just us. I mean, I have so much respect for DJ because, a lot of other promoters would have thrown up their hands and he just refuses to do that. Like I have so much admiration because he just doesn't have quit in him and he keeps me going because there are days and I'm just like, fuck it. But he just refuses to quit. And because of that, I refuse to quit. And I'm going to, make sure that every show that we put on under this banner is going to be the best show ever.
Awesome to hear. That's great. And I had DJ on my show during COVID, and I think we talked for nearly 4 hours or something like that. So I believe in his vision and what he wants to do, and I think it's great that he's got you involved because clearly you are just as passionate. And that's what I think attracted me to connecting with you is because I feel like I'm as passionate about wrestling, but unfortunately I'm over here in Perth, Western Australia, where I can't really do a lot with it other than have a podcast and all that. So to have you on the show, Shannon, has been so awesome, and I'm going to leave it there because there were other questions that I had for you, but now I'm going to leave them for next time because I'm going to have you back on the show because of all these great stories that you've told me. And I know from 25 years, there's probably so many more. You haven't even touched the surface yet. So this has been great. And so I guess, Shannon, at this point, I wanted to take it to our final segment of the show where I find out about your favorite things. Are you ready?
Absolutely.
Okay, Shannon. From your fandom in professional wrestling, working in professional wrestling, who is your favorite pro wrestler of all time?
Hollywood John Tatum.
John Tatum. Wow, that's a first for this podcast. Very cool answer. Okay, from the history of pro wrestling, is there one match that you would say that is my favorite match? Yeah, it's a tough one.
I don't know. Favorite match? Probably Tully Blanchard and I think it was Magnum TA in the cage.
Oh, right. Yep. That's a good one. I can't remember what the event was, but I know exactly what you're talking about. Okay, we're getting away from wrestling now. No more wrestling talk. Awesome. Do you have a favorite book?
Favorite book? It is called Bill Graham Presents My Life in Music, and it is about a rock promoter from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and he is my inspiration for being a promoter in anything. He's my idol. I'm actually going to show you something.
Please
do you see that right there?
Yes.
So that's Bill, and Bill's my idol. So before I came to New York, I was actually a music promoter, promoting concerts. And so before I promoted wrestling, I promoted concerts, and Bill's my idol. And so Bill's life story is what made me want to be a promoter. I read it in high school. And so that's my favorite book.
Right. You know what, Shannon? I fucking knew it. I fucking knew that you had something to do with music as well, because this whole time I've been thinking to myself, you know what? Because I used to be a lead singer in a hard rock band. I was thinking to myself, man, if only she was from Perth, Western Australia, and she was our manager, we would have gone somewhere, bro. Very cool. Very cool. Okay, getting away from books, favorite TV show?
My favorite TV show is either Miami Vice or The A-Team.
Very cool. Do you have a favorite film?
The Warriors.
Excellent. These are great answers. Favorite musical artist or band?
My favorite musical artist is The Band or Jefferson Airplane.
Oh, very nice. Very, very nice. Moving away from the arts now, do you have a favorite food?
Favorite food? Well, I'm from Buffalo, so chicken wings.
Delicious. Damn, that answer just made me hungry. Do you have a favorite place to eat on the road?
Sheets.
I've never heard of that.
Sheets is very similar to, like, if you've ever heard wrestlers talk about Wawa.
Yes, actually, that was Big F and Joe's favorite place to eat on the road.
So it's an American like convenience store, but it's actually it's larger than Wawa, and it's like sort of northeastern US, but like more Pennsylvania, places like that. It's fucking fantastic, and I love it.
Okay, I'm going to have to put another thing on the list. When I finally visit the US, it'll be one fat boy. Okay, favorite alcoholic beverage, and if you don't drink, just a favorite beverage in general.
Okay, so I don't drink a lot, but I do love rosé and sangria, but like I exist purely off of coffee, especially cold brew.
Awesome. Here comes the second last one, Shannon, and some may consider it the most naughtiest one of the favorite things, but you could get a very meaningful answer. We've had many meaningful answers, but also some very different answers as well. This one for you, favorite male body part or attribute. You see a good-looking guy, you know, what will Shannon Hunter look at first?
I actually, this is actually funny. I love fat guys. So I'm looking at, like torsos, honestly. Torsos and eyes. I love light eyes, but I love fat guys. I really do.
Really? It's just, that is so interesting. That's the first time someone said that.
Not a body girl, so I'm not a 6-pack abs girl or anything like that. I love fat guys. I love big, tall, fat guys.
Really cool. So you probably you probably see somebody like Bo Cooper and be like, "Oh, I like a bit of Bo Cooper." He's great. I've had him on the show before. So Shannon, the last one here. Favorite curse word?
Favorite curse word? Fuck.
Yep. Number one answer on the show. If this were Family Feud, that would be the number one answer.
That would be the number one answer. And yep. I say it all the time too. I've been such a, listen, I'm from New York City. I have been such a good girl on this interview. I'm proud of me.
Usually do you curse like a sailor, do you?
Like a sailor.
Awesome stuff. The funniest thing is I interviewed Big F and Joe about 4.5 hours ago, I think. And he said the exact same thing. Fuck was his favorite curse word, and that he says it all the time. I love that. Shannon.
Joe is one of my favorite people on earth.
Oh, he's great.
Also, I am really close friends with your countryman, Joel Bateman.
Oh, of course, Mr. Bateman. I just talked to him about, maybe an hour and a half ago or so. Actually, no, it wouldn't have been, because we've nearly been talking 2 hours now, probably about 2.5 hours ago. I told him that Big F and Joe was hoping to come to Australia, and I said, hey, bro, just let you know. And he's like, oh, don't worry, mate, I'm already onto it. So cool. Good on you, Joe. But Shannon, this has been so much fun learning about you, your journey in professional wrestling. I hope you've had fun. I've had fun. And I had to cut it off at some stage because I'm like, wait, whoa. Let's prolong this. Let's do this again. We'll learn even more. So thank you again so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Can't wait to do it again.
Excellent, Shannon. And thank all of you out there for joining me here on the Insider's Edge podcast here on the WZWA Network. We've just learned a whole lot here with my new friend, Shannon Hunter. And I'm Karlifornia. And guess what? We will see you down the road. Thank you.
Network, that's the way we play. Good God Almighty. Network, that's the way we play. Get puppies. Network, that's the way we play. Get.
The following announcement has been paid for by the WZWA Network.